The shape of the world long before fire became law, the world still believed in order. The continent of Asterion stretched between four seas, like an open palm, scarred by mountains and bound by rivers, older than any crown. Its lands were divided by borders drawn in blood and redrawn in ink, shaped by wars that had ended generations ago. Or so the chronicles claimed. Cities rose from stone and ambition, their towers built not to touch the sky, but to challenge it. Roads connected kingdoms, the way veins connect a heart, worn smooth by merchants, messengers, and armies, that no longer marched. The people of Asterion believed history was behind them. They believed the great wars had already been fought. They believed the age of monsters had ended. That belief was the first lie. In the north lay the Iron Realms, where winter shaped both land and soul. Fortresses were carved into mountainsides, and crowns were forged from steel rather than gold. Kings there ruled by endurance, not charm. Their banners were plain, their laws severe, and their memories long. No northern ruler forgot the price of weakness. To the west, the coastal kingdoms thrived on trade and tides. Their cities glittered with coin and contradiction, places where treaties were signed in candlelit chambers and broken at dawn. Power flowed not from bloodlines, but from vaults and fleets. Here crowns changed hands quietly, and betrayal was considered a skill. The southern realms were fertile and restless. Vast plains fed half the continent, while sprawling capitals fed on intrigue. Kings ruled from marble halls, surrounded by advisers who smiled too easily and listened too well. Peace here was fragile, maintained by marriages, promises, and the constant fear of famine. To the east lay lands few dared to cross, deserts and shattered ruins where cities had once stood and fallen long before recorded time. Ancient stones jutted from the sand like broken teeth, etched with symbols no living scholar could fully decipher. The wind carried whispers there, and sometimes, if one listened too closely, names. Between these lands existed peace, not a pure peace, but a sufficient one. Treaties held, borders remained intact, armies trained without marching. The world breathed slowly, carefully, as if afraid that one sharp movement might shatter everything. Crowns still gleamed. In the heart of the continent stood Valheim, the White City, capital of a powerful central kingdom and seat of Aryan Valthar. From the high windows of the map hall, Aryan watched the river cut through the valley below, silver and calm. Beyond it lay villages, farmlands, and roads that all led back to his crown, whether they knew it or not. He was young for a king, but not untested. He had inherited a realm intact, which history would later remember as both his greatest fortune and his greatest curse. Maps covered the long stone table behind him, borders traced in careful lines, alliances marked with colored seals, old battlefields circled and annotated. Aryan had studied them all. He knew where the world had broken before. What troubled him was how quiet it had become. "The world feels too still," he said at last, not turning. The advisers behind him exchanged glances, but said nothing. Silence, after all, was not a crime yet. Aryan did not wear his crown often. When he did, it felt heavier than gold had any right to be. To him, a crown was not a symbol of power, but a reminder. Every choice echoed outward. Every failure multiplied. Somewhere beyond his borders, something was moving. He felt it not as fear, but as pressure like air before a storm. Far to the south, on a road that led nowhere safe, Lyrian Vale walked beside people who no longer believed in borders. They were not refugees of war, at least not yet. They fled taxes, drought, and lords who had forgotten their names. Lyrian carried no banner and wore no uniform, but her posture marked her as a soldier to anyone who knew what to look for. She had once fought for a king. She would not do so again. At night they camped with small fires, careful not to draw attention. Children slept wrapped in cloaks too large for them. Adults whispered of rumors, villages gone silent, livestock found burned, skies that glowed red far beyond the horizon. "Do you hear that?" a boy asked one evening, as the wind died suddenly. Lyrian listened. There was no sound, no insects, no distant roads, just an absence so complete it felt deliberate. "I hear nothing," she answered. The boy nodded. "That's what scares me." In the east, beneath a ruined temple half buried by sand, Elmira Knox read words that were never meant to be read again. The parchment was older than the temple itself, and yet the ink looked fresh, dark, and restless. The letters were not written so much as branded into the surface, each line faintly warm beneath her fingers. "The covenant endures, while the fire sleeps." Elmira closed her eyes. She knew the text. She had sworn never to seek it again. Magic, she had learned, was not about power. It was about cost, and some truths demanded a price no single soul should pay. The dragons were not gone. They were bound, and bindings, she knew, could fail. In the west, among ranks of armored men and the smell of oil and iron, Tharic Ironblood listened to reports with barely concealed impatience. His camp ran on discipline and certainty, two things he trusted more than treaties. Maps here showed weaknesses, not borders. "Peace dulls men," he said. "War sharpens them." To Tharic, conflict was inevitable. The only sin was being unprepared when it came. He believed strength was the only honest language left in the world. None of them spoke of dragons aloud, yet the name Caeldrix still lived in forbidden texts and half-burned songs in ancient dragon, a witness to the rise and fall of empires. Not a beast of rage, but of memory. Those who truly understood the name did not invoke it lightly, and behind every rumor, every delayed caravan, every uneasy silence, there was another presence unseen, unnamed, the Veiled One, not recorded in histories, not blamed in chronicles, but always there, where truth bent just enough to become something else. The world still had shape, it still had rules, it still had crowns. And far beyond the reach of kings, deep beneath stone and sky, the earth began to warm. Kingdoms of stone and oath, if the world had a spine, it was built of kingdoms. They rose not from chance, but from oath and conquest, from rivers claimed and hills defended, until blood soaked deep enough to be remembered. Each crown in Asterion ruled land, but more importantly, it ruled belief. The belief that tomorrow would resemble today. That belief was strongest where stone was thickest. The kingdom of Valhem, ruled by Aryan Valther, sat at the heart of the continent, like a measured heartbeat. Its strength did not come from vast armies or untold wealth, but from balance. Valhem stood between powers, mediating disputes, hosting councils, enforcing treaties others preferred to ignore. For decades, it had been the quiet anchor that kept the world from drifting into chaos. Its armies were disciplined, its laws predictable. Roads were maintained, granaries stocked, borders watched but rarely tested. Many kingdoms resented Valhem's influence. Just as many depended on it. To the north lay the Iron Realms, a cluster of mountain kingdoms bound by tradition rather than unity. Their rulers were kings and queens of endurance, their people shaped by cold and scarcity. Stone walls there were not symbols. They were necessities. The Iron Realms did not seek expansion. They sought survival. Their banners bore no dragons, no suns, no promises of glory. Only iron sigils and muted colors, reminders that pride was a luxury winter did not forgive. Westward, across trade roads and salt air, rose the maritime crowns. These kingdoms ruled harbors and fleets, not fields. Their power shifted like tides, rising and falling with markets and alliances. Kings there rarely died in battle. They vanished in council chambers, replaced by successors who smiled as they signed new agreements. Gold flowed freely in the west, but loyalty did not. To the south sprawled the verdant realms, lands of grain and restless ambition. Their wealth fed others, and so they believed themselves untouchable. Their courts were alive with intrigue, lords maneuvering for influence, generals arguing over borders that moved a little every year. Peace, there was loud, crowded, and temporary. And beyond all of them, eastward, lay territories no crown claimed openly. Ruined cities slept beneath sand and silence, remnants of civilizations erased so thoroughly that even their names were debated. Scholars argued over whether those realms had fallen to war, plague, or something worse. The stones never answered. Yet even in peace tension lived. Caravans disappeared along familiar routes. Messengers arrived late, pale and shaken, unable to explain why. Livestock were found burned where no fire should have spread. Each incident alone was dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern no ruler wished to acknowledge. In Valheim, Arion convened council after council. Coincidence, some said. Bandits, said others. Exaggeration, insisted those who feared panic more than truth. Arion listened, and remembered. He remembered old accounts written in margins, half-scorched scrolls, warnings disguised as myth. He remembered that peace, when prolonged, often made men careless. Beyond the halls of power, ordinary lives continued. Farmers harvested, soldiers drilled. Children played at being knights and kings, their wooden swords striking imaginary foes. The world appeared whole. But beneath that surface, oaths strained. In the Iron Realms, border patrols doubled without explanation. In the west, fleets lingered longer in harbor. In the south, mercenary companies found more work than usual. None of it was declared war. Yet everywhere, preparations were made. Among the common folk, rumors spread faster than truth ever could. They spoke of shadows in the clouds, of distant thunder on clear nights, of heat rising from the ground, as if the earth itself were breathing. Few dared to speak the old word. Dragons, in forgotten towers and sealed archives, names once erased, began to reappear. Priests argued with scholars. Soldiers prayed more often. Kings slept less. And somewhere beyond the reach of borders, something ancient stirred, not with rage, but with patience. The kingdoms stood firm, their crowns still unbroken. They did not yet understand that stone cracks long before it falls. Those who carried the weight history remembers wars by names and dates. It forgets the people who felt them coming. Before banners burned and skies broke open, there were those who sensed the shift, not as prophecy, but as burden. They carried it quietly, each in their own way, unaware that their paths were already tightening toward one another. Arion Valther learned to recognize unease as a form of knowledge. As king, he was expected to speak with certainty, to offer answers that sounded final, even when they were not. Yet alone, without crown or council, Arion allowed himself doubt. He walked the upper walls of Valheim at dawn, watching the city wake beneath him, and wondered how many lives depended on his restraint. Valheim's strength had always been balance. It was also its weakness. Every decision he delayed kept peace intact, but every delay gave unseen forces time to move. Arion felt the pressure of unseen hands shaping events beyond his borders, and the thought haunted him more than open rebellion ever could. A war declared could be fought. A war hidden could not. In the south, Lyrian Vale buried a child. The boy from the road had fallen ill days earlier. No wound, no fever she could explain. His breathing had grown shallow, his skin warm, as if he lay too close to fire. By morning, he was gone. They buried him beneath a lone tree, far from any marker, that might draw attention. The people stood in silence, unsure who should speak. Lyrian said nothing. She had learned long ago that words rarely softened loss. That night she kept watch while others slept. The air felt wrong, heavy, close. She remembered battlefields before the charge, that moment when even the birds went quiet. She tightened her grip on her sword. Whatever was coming, she knew this much. The innocent would feel it first. Far to the east, in shadowed halls beneath stone, Elmira Knox prepared to break a vow. She had sworn never to interfere again, never to guide events that would unfold regardless of her will. Magic had taught her humility through consequence. Every spell was a door, and some doors could not be closed once opened. Yet the signs were unmistakable. Ancient bindings had begun to strain. Symbols once dormant responded to her presence, warming faintly as if recognizing an old debt. Elmira consulted records hidden, even from kings' accounts of agreements forged not between nations, but between species. The dragons had not been slain. They had been bound by choice, and that choice had been made to save a world that no longer remembered the cost. Elmira feared not the dragon's awakening, but the ignorance that would greet it. When men forget why a cage exists, they curse the cage, never the beast. In the west, Tharic Ironblood watched his soldiers train beneath a sun, already too hot for the season. He saw potential everywhere, strength waiting for purpose. His captains spoke of discipline and readiness, but Tharic understood the deeper truth. Men needed an enemy. Without one, they turned on each other. He had no patience for counsels, or warnings wrapped in parchment. If the world was changing, it would favor those willing to act first. Tharic did not believe in fate. He believed in momentum, and momentum could be seized. While kings debated and scholars whispered, Tharic sharpened steel. Above all their lives, beyond any mortal reach, memory endured. Caeldrix had watched empires rise like sparks and die like embers. He remembered skies unscarred by smoke and fields untouched by blade. He remembered the first crown lifted in defiance, and the first city burned in answer. He did not stir in anger. He waited, for dragons understood time differently. To them, centuries were pauses, and patience was not mercy, but judgment delayed, and somewhere, always just beyond certainty, the Veiled One moved through courts and camps, unseen. Messages arrived where they should not. Old grudges resurfaced at convenient moments. Truth bent not enough to break, but enough to mislead. No hand was visible, no name spoken, only outcomes. The world still turned, crowns still ruled, and each of them, king, soldier, mage, general, dragon, stood at the edge of a choice they did not yet know they were making. The fire had not fallen, but it had begun to breathe. Whispers before the storm, the first signs were not flames. They were questions. In courts across Asterion, rulers began asking the same things without knowing why. Why were borders quieter than usual? Why did messengers hesitate before delivering routine reports? Why did maps feel outdated the moment they were unrolled? No one said dragon. No one needed to. In Valhem, Arion Valtha received a letter sealed with unfamiliar wax. The sigil belonged to a minor lord from the southern marches, one known for exaggeration and debt. Arion expected another plea for aid. Instead, the letter spoke of heat, not fire. Heat, crops wilting overnight, wells running warm, stone walls sweating as if the earth beneath them were fevered. The Lord wrote of cattle refusing to graze, of birds abandoning their nests, of men waking from dreams filled with wings and shadow. Arion folded the letter slowly. He did not dismiss it. Within days, similar reports arrived from different regions, written by hands that did not know each other. Each letter described the same unease with different words. Arion ordered the reports archived, not hidden but watched. Patterns mattered more than panic still. He began sleeping in the map hall. South of the Great Plains, Lyrian Vile and her people reached a crossroads long abandoned. The stone markers were cracked, their inscriptions worn away by time. No road felt safe any more. That night, the sky burned red at the horizon. It was distant, far enough that no sound followed, but the color lingered longer than sunset should allow. Some fell to their knees praying. Others stared in silence, unable to look away. Lyrian felt the ground vibrate beneath her boots, faint but unmistakable. She had felt it once before, years ago during a siege when the walls finally gave way. This was deeper, older. She made a decision before dawn. They would not continue south. In the east, Elmira Knox stood before a sealed chamber she had avoided for decades. The door bore no lock, only symbols carved so deeply they seemed part of the stone itself. Each symbol represented restraint, not of magic, but of will. Elmira pressed her palm to the surface. The stone was warm. Her breath caught. The bindings were weakening faster than she had feared. Something was pulling at them from both sides, pressure from below and ignorance from above. Inside the chamber lay records of the First Accord, the pact that ended the last Dragon War. It was not a victory. It was a compromise forged through devastation, sealed by sacrifice. Men had sworn never to rule by dragon fire again. Dragons had sworn never to rule at all. Breaking that balance would not restore order, it would erase it. Elmira turned away, knowing she could delay what was coming, but not prevent it. In the west, Tharic Ironblood received word of unusual troop movements along 3 borders at once. Kings claimed they were exercises. Tharic laughed. Exercises did not involve emptying granaries or recalling veterans. He ordered his forces to advance, not to observe. Information was a weapon, and Tharic intended to wield it first. If the world is changing, he told his captains, we will be the ones ready to shape it. That night fires burned longer in his camp. High above mountains, no map named, stone-cracked. Deep beneath the earth, ancient chambers filled with heat. Scales shifted against stone. Breath gathered, not as flame, but as awareness. Kaldrix opened one eye, not to awaken, to remember. He felt the strain of the old bonds, the careless tug of men who no longer understood what they had bound. He felt fear ripple through the world, not sharp enough to be useful, not focused enough to stop what was coming. Judgment, he knew, was inevitable. The only question was who would survive it. And in places where truth should have reached light, the Veiled One ensured it did not. Messages were delayed. Warnings softened, doubt encouraged. A careful hand guided the world toward misunderstanding at precisely the wrong moments. The storm was not announced. It was prepared, and when it came, it would not ask who was ready. The first sign of flame, the first fire, did not fall on a capital. It fell on a place that mattered to no map. A border town stood at the edge of the southern plains, too small for politics, too distant for protection. Its walls were low, its gates old, its people known only to themselves. It existed because nothing had ever needed it not to. Until that night, the sky darkened long before sunset. Clouds gathered without wind, heavy and unmoving, as if held in place by an unseen will. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe. Animals panicked. Horses screamed. Dogs broke their chains. Birds fled in chaotic flocks. Then came the sound, not thunder, a low, distant roar that rolled across the land like a memory returning. In Valhem, Arion Valther felt it through stone and bone. The map hall trembled. Candles guttered, their flames bending toward the windows as if drawn outward. Find the source, he ordered, already moving. But even as messengers ran, he knew. This was beyond borders. South of the plains, Lyrian Vale watched the horizon ignite. The red glow she had seen days before now rose into the sky, brighter, sharper, alive. Heat washed over the land in waves. The ground shuddered beneath her feet. "Run," she said, though no one needed to be told. They fled as the night behind them turned to fire. In the east, Elmira Knox dropped to her knees, as ancient wards shattered. The sealed chamber screamed, not in sound, but in resonance. Symbols carved into stone flared white-hot, before cracking apart. The first accord was breaking. "They've done it," she whispered. "They've forgotten." Magic surged, uncontrolled, no longer restrained by balance, but driven by desperation. Elmira knew then that whatever came next would not be contained by spell or treaty. Far to the west, Tharic Ironblood watched the sky from his camp as heat lightning spread across the clouds. His captains looked to him for orders. He smiled. "At last," he said. Above mountains untouched by man, stone exploded outward. A massive shape emerged from the depths of the earth, scattering debris like ash. Wings unfolded, vast, ancient, and scarred by ages of restraint. The air burned as breath met sky. Caldrix rose, not in fury, not in haste. He rose because the world had called him back. Below him, the border town vanished beneath flame. Stone melted, wood ignited instantly. Screams lasted only moments before the heat stole sound itself. No army stood against him. No banner challenged the sky. When the fire faded, nothing remained but glassed earth and drifting embers. No crown had fallen, but the world had changed in hidden halls and guarded chambers. The veiled one smiled behind unseen eyes. The first move had been made. Fear would do the rest. By dawn, smoke stained the horizon across 3 kingdoms. By noon, rumors raced faster than riders. By nightfall, every ruler in Asterion knew the truth they had denied for generations. The dragons were not legends. The peace was over, and the war that would kill all crowns had begun.